to the Treasury Update Podcast, Coffee Break Sessions presented by Strategic Treasurer, covering foundational topics and core Treasury issues in about the same amount of time it takes you to drink your cup of coffee. I'll be your host, Jason Campbell, Business Development Leader at Strategic Treasurer. Welcome back for another great episode of the Coffee Break Session. We're going to move this one lightning fast compared to our past couple ones in regards to payments, because this is one I find is probably one of, I've been looking forward to this one actually. Real-time payments. I think my time here at Strategic Treasurer, as I keep hearing about real-time payments and, having accurate payments, and there's so many different dialogues, there's so much conversation that goes around, I'm just so intrigued and interested by it. So I'm looking forward to this session today. And joining me is Craig Jeffery, Managing Partner at Strategic Treasurer. So Craig, welcome to this lightning fast conversation around real-time payments.
Well, I'm not a lightning fast communicator, so I'll try to keep up. But if people like to get the bottom line at the front end, real-time payments are good.
All right. Well, see, that's how fast this conversation can be. It's just that it's good. All right. Well, no, actually, let's go in a little bit in depth to make sure, why is it good? So let's talk about what exactly are real-time payments.
Well, these are immediate payments that occur in the U.S. over the RTP network. This is run by the clearinghouse. So if you're in a different country, you may not know much about the clearinghouse, but this is a settlement system owned by a bunch of banks. So this is separate from the central bank. Most countries have a central bank, handles the different clearing systems they use, the payment clearing systems. In the U.S., we like to have, something managed by the Fed or the central bank, as well as something that's set up privately, right? That's our nature. We have that for every place. So the clearinghouse is one of those methods for settling immediate payments. And, what are real-time payments? These are credit push payments only. There's no debits. So a credit payment is the initiator sends the payment to the receiver. So the person who's communicating the transfer is sending money to the other party. There's no, I'm not debiting you for your insurance bill. I'm only paying you, your policy benefits.
So go into a little bit, if you don't mind, talking about a system, right? There's always got to be a system, process, systems, parameters, things like that. So is there a system for this? And if so, how does it work?
Yeah, there is a system for this. It's the RTP network, so run by the clearinghouse. So it's a new platform. It's a new payment rail. And I think they're quite proud about mentioning it's like the first, it's one of the first new payment rails in 40 years in the US. Now there's other new payment rails coming on as well, but this is a new platform for handling those transfers. Now, most corporate treasury, corporate AP professionals don't really know about the systems that the banks use or that clear money, but just knowing that they exist is helpful. So there is a network for processing that. It's
funny, you keep saying rails, and even though this is a lightning fast conversation, I'm thinking bullet trains, fast trains. That's just what was in my mind while you were going through this.
Yeah, they call it rails. I think I'm not sure why, but you think a payment goes over some rail. Well, none of these payments actually went on a rail, but you can picture in your mind it's a system, right? I mean, so many of these things are virtual, electronic. How do we picture them in our heads or create an image? So whether it's a rail, or maybe you'd say when you see a jet in the sky, you see the pathway in the sky.
I wonder if you can kind of dive in a little deeper and talking about, as we said at the beginning, right? Real-time payments, good. Why? Let's go a little bit more why. There was some good benefits around this particular side of payments.
There's a couple, and you can certainly go to the clearinghouse and see all of their literature on it. And there's quite a bit on there. Maybe we should drop that in the show notes. But speed matters in payments to some extent in some cases and to a great extent in others. So real-time payments are quick. Data matters as well. So better formats matter. And that's kind of a hard thing to cover in a podcast, but richer data, more structured data like XML and formats that contain better data matter as well. But what are some of the benefits? I took the liberty, knowing you're going to ask me about real-time payments, of copying some of those out there. So I think this is cheating for a podcast, but who knows, right? You're just hearing our voices. One is it's open 24/7. If you use FedWire, it's open and closed, right? Maybe the bank leaves it open, but those payments aren't going to go until the next day. So this is open 24/7. So whether you're sending or receiving payments, it's open all the time. The other is when the money hits there, it's immediately available. You think about that process where it's like, oh, okay, it's going to clear the next day. You got a memo credit. Tomorrow I'll have credit for that. Well, this is immediately available. When it hits, you have availability. That's pretty important for consumers and for corporations. The other issue is like revocability and irrevocability. So like wire transfers are always known as irrevocable. Like you can't just force it back through the payment system. If you paid someone incorrectly and they won't send it back to you and you can't convince the banks to do that, you might have to go through the courts to get them to send it back to you. And there's certain times where you don't want something that can be revoked or withdrawn. So that is really, really important. The other piece that I'll say is it used to be we talked about ubiquity all the time, right? You know, every place, everywhere. And this idea of ubiquity is this can be used. You can access this if you're a federally insured depository institution. So any U.S. depository institution can be a participant, no matter how big or how small they are. They don't have to own the clearinghouse, but it's everyone can participate. You know, those are some of the key things. The other is a forward-looking item. You've heard us talk about open treasury, open banking, this idea of how can I extend what I do? You know, if I'm a bank, how can I put payments within an ERP platform? If I'm sharing information, where does that information need to go? It needs to go into a treasury system. How can I, extend what's being done into another system that's more direct, more readily available, more out of the box? And so they refer to extensibility. And this is the type of format and messaging that will support other types of, initiation and transactions. For example, that we want to do a request for a payment or we send an invoice. We want that to be a request for a payment so that it allows for this extension of the business transaction, more streamlined. And so those are some of the big features. I mean, 24/7 is really one of the most interesting things for that.
I think you just confirmed that money doesn't sleep. I think that's what you just said.
I did. I said it with a lot more words, like way more words. Money doesn't sleep.
You can 24/7. It's open all the time.
Cash is king. Money doesn't sleep. You'll trigger me into saying those common things.
I love it. All right. So now we talked about some of the great benefits. And I know you had mentioned kind of one risk is that, irrevocability that you spoke of. But what are, obviously that's a pretty significant one. That's big if you have to all of a sudden your money is being sent to the wrong place and you can't work with whether it's a network or the bank to, bring it back, and you have to go through a court system and you got added on, potential costs, potential losses that come to that point, or whether or not you can get it back. Right. So what are some of the other risks out there that relates to real-time payments?
Not just with real-time payments, but with every payment methodology, the concern about payment fraud and the security you have around payments, the initiation. Far too many companies are not careful enough with their payment processes, the controls around them. I mean, far too often you hear good-sized corporations avoiding using security services that their banks offer that are commercially reasonable, that a normal company should be using. And they dismiss them because maybe 10 years ago they weren't relevant, or they think that the bank's going to bear all the risk on these transactions. Every single payment system, I'm going to answer that question. What are the risks? It's payment fraud. The need to protect the most liquid assets of the organization, which are payments, either from direct attack and compromise of a system or compromise of a person's brain through business email compromise or through some other method to get you to send payments through any of these payment methods. So that's my biggest concern on that. I mean, it's usually about payment fraud.
As you were talking about the risk, and you're talking about this payment fraud, and I think it can't necessarily be afraid of things. It's more so of being inquisitive and peeling back the layers as much as you can and build it back to knowing that it's a great process that has a lot of great upsides, a lot of great benefits. But you got to ensure, right, and have that confidence put into your system capabilities, and not just your systems, your people, right, your departments who are handling these cash transactions to ensure that they have the proper training and the proper tools and everything, the stars, the moon align, right, to ensure that you have your I's dotted and your T's crossed in a sense, right?
Yeah. So I mean, some of the security principles of using what's commercially reasonable. your bankers tell you things, you should listen to them. They're not doing it to make a killing on the small fees they charge for their security services. They know what a pain it is when you suffer a loss, and how it's not just the loss of the funds that you have, it's the embarrassment, it's the time wasted trying to resolve that. So listen to that very seriously. The other is some of the other protection methods. We're all used to things like dual controls to protect transactions and transfers. But sometimes we don't think about what happens to payment instructions or payment files as they move from system to system, or move from system to an entry point. Let's say to enter them in a bank portal, or to load a file through a bank portal, or to create a file that gets posted via SFTP. Each of those places has a file that there's a point of exposure where that file could be manipulated or changed, or a new file created and sent, which could go and move money to an account that a criminal controls. And so that's one aspect, bank services, thinking about the control process that's inside a company all the way to the bank, as well as you were saying, this people being trained, not just on things like phishing and keeping a clean desktop and hygienic desktop, but ensuring they understand the various ways that criminals, try to penetrate your system, try to compromise people so that they can get access to the funds, or have you transfer the funds or get transfers out. There's a significant number of plays in their playbook according to different categories that they're trying to do this. And so strengthening the human element, making sure you have a internal secure payment process, as well as using commercially reasonable security procedures and services that your banks offer. Those are all quite useful. I know that was a big riff on security when you asked a simple question at the end, but that's what you got. It wasn't lightning speed. It was excessive information.
It's always serious when you talk about security, right? So, it's good to have those conversations, because it's good to have the point where, it's a serious nature, right? But you can't be afraid of things, and we just got to make sure that, having like you said, a plan, right? And having a plan, executing a plan, and double tracking that plan itself, but realize that there's a lot of upside to real-time payments to be lightning fast. So again, Craig, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I was really looking forward to this part of this conversation. And for our listeners, be sure to tune in every first and third Thursday of the month for a new episode of the Coffee Break Session. As usual, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please send us a note at podcast@strategictreasurer.com. And until next time, take care.
This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.